Okay. So in 1800, much of Europe's economy was still based on farming. Times were changing, though, particularly in Great Britain. There, fewer people were working on farms and more were working in manufacturing. Great Britain's natural resources, such as coal and iron, were important factors in the growth of the British industry. So here are your targets for today. These will be given to you throughout the video. So when we get to these points, you will answer the question and submit and continue on with the rest of the notes. The Industrial Revolution can be summed up in a picture like this. Please take some time to make some noticings. So during the 1700s, changes in technology began that would transform the world. These changes were based on a shift in how people worked. For centuries, people had used human and animal power as their main energy sources. Then they began to develop water and steam sources, steam power to drive new machines and perform countless tasks. This era, when the use of power-driven machinery was developed, is called the Industrial Revolutions. For several reasons, it started in Great Britain. There were many factors for success: exploration and colonialism. Great Britain claimed colonies around the world that provided vast amounts of raw materials, such as cotton fiber. In addition, the colonies became new markets for British goods. Sea power. Britain could bring in raw materials and send finished goods around the world because it had the largest, most powerful navy and merchant fleet in the world. Political stability. Although Great Britain fought wars in Canada and North America during the 1700s, at home the country was at peace and commerce thrived. They had government support. Parliament passed laws that favored businesses, helping the country compete successfully against other nations. And it had a growth of the private investment. Private businesses funded experiments for creating better products, what we would call research and development today. Much of the research and development took place on farms. Of some of Britain's so-called gentlemen farmers began to experiment with agricultural methods. Jethro Tull was among these wealthier farmers. In about 1701, Tull invented the seed drill, a machine that would make planting grain much more efficient. Farmers experimented with other aspects of agriculture also. For example, they improved livestock breeding methods to raise healthier animals. Better varieties of food crops, such as potatoes, were developed. These improvements increased Britain's food supply. Since more food can support more people, Britain's population grew rapidly. Another agricultural development had mixed results. Wealthy landowners could buy up fields that had previously been shared by rich and poor farmers alike. The new landowners combined the small fields to create farms and fenced them, a transformation called the enclosure movement. This movement allowed for more efficient farming methods and therefore further increased the food supply. However, enclosure also threw countless farmers off the land. Unable to make a living in the countryside, these poor farmers went to the cities for jobs. There, they would form the workforce for growing industries. These conditions all point to the basic reason why the Industrial Revolution began in Great Britain. The country had the essential elements that a nation needs to achieve economic success, what economists call the factors of production. There are three factors: land, labor, and capital. Land, in this context, means all of the place's natural resources. Great Britain had all the resources it needed for industry. It had coal to burn as fuel and iron to make steel and machinery. But to get industry started, no resource was more important than water. People used Britain's streams and rivers to turn water wheels and generate power, and many of those same waterways provided transportation between mines, factories, and markets. A network of canals connected major rivers. In the mid-1700s, England already had about 1,000 miles of canals, which grew to about 4,000 miles by 1800. Also, for long-distance shipping, Great Britain had good deep-water harbors. The Industrial Revolution began with the British cloth-making or textile industry. British workers had been hand-weaving woolen cloth for centuries. Weaving was a cottage industry, a craft occupation performed in the home. But the old ways of thinking of making cloth were completely transformed by industrialization, or the process of changing to power-driven machinery. In Great Britain, most fabric was made of wool or cotton. The wool supply increased because the enclosure movement converted so many farms to pastures for raising more sheep. Shipments of cotton fiber came from the British colonies, particularly in India and North America. In the Southern American colonies, the trade in cotton had a tragic result. Slave labor helped make cotton farming more profitable. Therefore, as Great Britain brought more and more American cotton, slavery became more entrenched throughout the South. A new invention also helped keep the American cotton industry and slavery profitable. Pulling seeds from raw cotton blossoms was time-consuming when done by hand. An American named Eli Whitney solved the problem. He built a machine called the cotton gin that removed the seeds efficiently. The fiber was spun into thread or yarn. James Hargreaves, a weaver, revolutionized the spinning process with the machine called the spinning jenny, which spun several threads at once. Hargreaves' machine was not perfect. The thread it produced was still thick and prone to break when woven into cloth. Richard Arkwright, another inventor, solved this problem with the spinning frame, which spun stronger, finer thread. Finally, the thread was woven into fabric. The traditional in-home weaving loom was about 6 feet wide, the width a man could reach from side to side to push the thread back and forth on a shuttle. The flying shuttle, patented by John Kay, doubled the speed at which a weaver could do the job. Because many workers lost their jobs as a result, Kay was attacked and fled to France. He died in poverty. Nevertheless, the ever faster spinning machines soon created a demand for better weaving machines. To meet that demand, in 1785, Edmund Cartwright patented the power loom, a larger, faster weaving system. A simple fact of physics powered the Industrial Revolution. When water is heated and changes into steam, it expands. British inventors learned how to harness the force of steam to drive machines that transformed the world. The first commercially successful steam engine was built in England in 1712, but it was very slow. Then an inventor named James Watt came up with crucial innovations. His engine was faster and more efficient at driving machinery. By 1800, about 500 of Watt's steam engines were chugging and hissing in mines and factories throughout Britain. The widespread use of steam engines began when inventors put them to use in the textile mills. Using steam power instead of water power meant that factories no longer had to be built near ready supplies of water. Instead, they could be located where fuel was readily available and where workers already lived. Also, factories could be built closer to roads and ports from which raw materials and finished products could be shipped. Steam was soon applied to other uses, eventually producing a revolution in transportation. In about 1802, Richard Trevithick used a steam engine to power the first locomotive. Steam-powered trains soon became essential to the Industrial Revolution. They made possible the fast shipment of finished goods even to faraway markets. Steam engines required immense amounts of fuel to heat water. Wood was scarce, though, because most of England's forests had been cut down for farming. But the country had a big supply of another valuable fuel, coal. Consequently, as more factories were built to run on steam, the coal mining industry in northern and western England grew. By 1800, Great Britain produced 80% of Europe's coal. The miners' families often experienced tragedy. Working in the mines was a dangerous job. Mine explosions, coal dust, collapsing shafts, and the sheer hard work took a heavy toll. Children were often hired to slip down the narrow shafts and pick and haul coal. Their lives were hard. One account describes the children, boys and girls, earned their wages by drawing the coal in tubs along the galleries by means of a belt and chain which passed around their waists. Many girls were thus employed and after a time became crooked and deformed. Such reports caught the public's attention. Industrialization continued for some time, though, before this situation changed. With steam driving British factories, industrialization increased rapidly and soon spread to Western Europe and the United States. Other regions, including Asia and Africa, did not industrialize in the 1800s. So the industry spreads across Europe and created many of the changes we still experience today.